Hello everyone, welcome again to this Pyramix seminar. We're gonna discuss source and destination for that one. So source and destination, some of you perhaps before starting, if you have any questions, please use the chat. If you have a remark or if the sound is bad or whatever it is, please use the chat. I will try to do my best to answer your question or to have a better sound or whatever is required. Good. The idea, the concept of source and destination might be familiar to some of you, and it might be not to others. My idea here is to share this in a few steps. The first one being to explaining a little bit what source and destination is and theoretically and where it comes from. And then having a basic session, a basic stereo session, and creating a source and destination project out of this basic stereo session. This would be an emulation of for those who have worked with it or who know it from the name, the Sonic Solution, which was the first digital audio workstation, I guess already in the 80s, but in the 90s, who was doing this type of configuration. And then I'm happy also to discuss why is it used? Because it's a very musical approach. That's the aim, but we will understand why. And then we're going to move to something a bit more contemporary with a multi-track project, first of all a 5.1 project. And then we're going to see how we manage the fade editor as well in those multi-track environments. We're going to see also how we manage the amount of tracks, because obviously if we say multi-track, it's going to increase the amount of tracks on my screen, and therefore visibility and ergonomy starts to be a topic or a big topic. And at the end, we're going to move to a much bigger environment, a 48 track. It could be even bigger, whatever, but that's what I have in my hand here. So a 48 track project. On that one, this 48 track project, I will then show a more contemporary way to work, basically without in and out points, or what we call gates. You will understand that during the webinar what it all means. So first of all, before making my camera much smaller to show you how to do all of that in Pyramix, I just wanted to explain, to give a little history behind there. Is that in the olden days, in the tape days, during, for example, a concert recording, or let's say a recording of a piece with a classical orchestra, or, I mean, let's talk about classical, but it could be something else, but let's say classical, symphonical orchestra, whatever it is. And there was some rehearsals, there were some public rehearsals, perhaps one, and then like 4, 5, 6 representations. And there was a producer who she or he was writing down on the score on which parts of the score were the best evenings or the best moments where they were played, either the evening 1 or the evening 5 or the rehearsal, the public rehearsal, whatever it was. So that the idea is that we would then later on post-produce it, assemble all these bits and pieces. And of course, in the olden days, that means we had perhaps one reel for the first evening or the main rehearsal, a second reel for the first, as I said, the first evening, then the second evening, another reel for the continuous evenings each time, each evening a reel, let's say. And then the person who was putting all of that together was cutting the pieces following the score, stick them somewhere. Of course, it was crucial to name them properly, so that there was no mix-up about this and not making mistakes, because there was no Apple Z or Control Z, no undo, and then stick them together, and that would be the master tape then. And this master tape could then be recopied to have a unified tape without the stickers, for example. But that's another story. So we're going to process in the same way. It means that we're going to emulate. That's the way, at least, it has been done in Sonic Solution, and they're going to respect this way. Then we can, of course, personalize it, but at least to introduce it, is that on the bottom, I'm going to create a stereo track, which will be my sources. So we will have the public recording, we will have the first evening recording, the second evening recording, the third evening recording. These are basically my sources or my takes, if you wish, either or. And we're gonna align them horizontally like that. And on the top, I will have what we call a destination track. And this destination track will then, which is empty at the beginning, and I will then build up all the portions that I decided are the best portions of the different recordings. And I have two ways of working. Either I use one take or one source as a main track or guide track, because that's perhaps what I decide or what the producer has decided that is the best performance out of all those different performances. And then we're going to insert or overwrite the pieces that we think are better played or better performed somewhere else, or because there's a chair noise or public noise or whatever it is, for technical reasons or for artistic reasons, whatever. And then we're going to build up all this destination. And of course, what we have to be careful then is that the passage between those different takes, those different sources is smooth. And with a crossfade editor, we will be able to make this passage from one source to another at least the least audible as possible, or non-audible would be preferable, so that we can make it a smooth transition on that aspect. Good. And I'm gonna make myself much smaller with this little fantastic software. I go down there, put me here in the corner, and so that you have a full view over the Pyramix. There we go. Good. And now I gotta start here. I'm gonna start with my Pyramix and project. So basically I have a stereo project in here. I have an audio file. I just put something in my timeline so that you see whatever, something moving, some waveforms. I have here a stereo track, and I have a stereo strip, here in my mixer. And this is where I'm gonna start with. And all in my source and destination environment, or to create it, it's going to happen here in two tabs, one called track list and the other one track group. And those two tabs will be very useful to be able to create the source and destination environment. So here, see, I would have all my tracks listed. I only have two for the moment, so it's called stereo 1, stereo 2, or stereo left, stereo right, as you wish. And I have a track group that is empty for the moment. So I'm going to create a first track group that I'm going to call destination. I can give the name I want. I'm just trying to fit to what I'm going to explain. But if I want to call it Arthur, I can call it Arthur, whatever. Now I'm going to apply this group to my two tracks. Obviously, I only have two tracks. And I'm going to select those by holding Shift, both together. And in my group line, I'm going to say destination. So the group here is basically representing or giving me the choice of all the tracks I've created. And for the moment, I only created one track group, which is called destination. And I've chosen it here. Great. And now going back into my track, sorry, I just removed it by clicking it. So destination, there we go. And now by going back onto track group, I select my track group, which is now, how can I say, linked together to those two tracks, to the stereo strip, if you want, to these two tracks. I now say here, click here to duplicate. Instead of click here to add, I go click here to duplicate. And I'm going to make a duplication of this track group. And you will see it will copy the group, but also its content. So this time, I'm going to call my new track group source. And automatically, it showed my source down here, okay, and my destination up there. So it made a copy of these two tracks just below and with a new track group on that aspect. And I see now in my track list, I have two of those. It took the name again and so on and so on. If I go on my track header also, I see that here, if I click on this minus, there I can make appear the little header so that I have the track arming, the mute, or whatever is required from my track group. If I make that a little bit bigger, I see a little bit better also what's happening on there. And I could right click and just say change the color, because I prefer having another color for that so that I can determine those easily. Obviously, if I would have click on those, they would be another color. Or I can make even something more abstract so that we really see the difference. Okay, between blue and green, obviously, it is very obvious. Great. Going now to my track group, one important thing, the first important thing to understand is that in terms of the mixer, my mixer is still just one stereo strip. So that means that let me make a copy, or let me bring something else in here. I will bring another media in there, something very different. Let me just narrow a little bit the waveform like this. And so when I play back this, obviously I'm summing, sorry for this horrible mixture, but obviously I'm summing the green clips with the blue clips, because here I'm sending that in my input strip left one, so the one on the mixer here, and here I'm sending actually the same in here. So I'm summing both. So, which is not what I want in that case, but I could want it in other cases. But there you're going to see how we're going to configure the track groups to be able to avoid this and have them exclusively. So in my track group list, if I go a little bit further down here, I have a bunch of different functionalities. And one of these functionality is no DAW audio. You don't hear that? I put it a little bit louder. I think you should have, nope. Well, I don't understand why. Anyway, it's nothing really interesting in terms of the audio. Barely. Oh, okay. I can make it much louder, but it's really nothing interesting. But if I make it much louder, it will destroy my ears. But so I guess you hear it. I guess you hear it now. It's nothing interesting. It's just summing these two different songs that have nothing to do with to each other. Just to explain it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the comment. I'm not showing anything interesting in terms of audio. I'm just trying to explain what happens in there. Good. But please continue to make comments if something needs to be changed. Good. So now the idea about this is that I'm going to go back into those functionalities, and I'm going to say here in this column, there's an auto solo functionality. So I'm going to apply it to my destination and to my source by just ticking in here. You see that now it says yes on auto solo. And so it means now I see it also graphically there. There's an auto solo activated. And if I click down there, there's an auto solo activated on that track. And I can move it also with my arrows, with my keyboard, for example, as a shortcut up and down. But so it means that I can play this one, and I can jump to the one below, and I can go back to the top one, and it moves from one to the other. So automatically, it will solo the track group I'm selected, or I have selected. This is the first thing. The second thing is then that what I want also is that I would like, for example, when I go, because remember, I would have to choose or listen to my destination, to my source, move then to my take 2, my take 3, and then go back to my destination. Yeah, this will fit, or this is not the same pitch perhaps has changed from one evening to the other, or the speed has slightly changed. So of course I have tools then to stretch it if I need to or whatever, but I will try to find the best one and go back and forth between those two timelines if you wish so. So there we have a functionality called Keep Cursor. And if I enable this functionality, let me move at the very beginning here of my blue, my destination, and then I go here to about the end to my source. And so moving again one to the other, you see that the cursor jumps back to where it was each time it remembers it moving from my source to my destination or vice versa. So this is a second very handy functionality that I can, or that I use to emulate my source and destination. Then a last functionality that is crucial is that I might want, for example, when I'm in my source, I would like to zoom very much in here for whatever reason, because I would like to select something, or I would like to cut out something, or I just want to see something in a closer up direction. But obviously it does it also on my destination. So if I say free zoom, and I'm just going to do it on my source, I now can independently zoom in and zoom out and see things in between my source and my destination. So this is my destination. I go back to my source, and now I can, well, I don't hear anything because I've been to there. I can now zoom really in and move back here and have these two things independently in terms of a timeline. I could do that also for my destination. What I don't like, but this is then very personal, and everyone, how can I say, everyone can of course personalize and change it the way they wish or they want. But if I click free zoom here, it adds me a second timeline, which personally I find it disturbing, because I want to be my destination as a main timeline and not have one timeline that is linked to no audio and then have two different timelines for my destination and my source. But that's how it is. One interesting thing also, I can set free markers so that my source, for example, during my recording or while I was listening to my different sources, my different takes, I could take some markers, and those are different than the markers of my main project. So I can keep them to my source very happily and easily, and I can of course jump from one to the other over there because there's a chair noise, there's something I need to edit, or there's a pitch change or whatever it is. Good. Then one important thing, we haven't started yet to edit. One very important thing is that we still have to define which of this track group is a source and which of this track group is a destination. Remember, we gave here names called source and destination, but that's just the name. We have here then in the track group a type. And because, again, I could have named this one rather than sources, I could have said takes and this one after. Great. But now I have to define which one is the source and which one is the destination. Why? Because I'm going to use in and out points, what we call gates, to set where I want to cut in, where I want to cut out, and move it to my destination. So this is obviously a source, and this is obviously a destination. And this seems a bit silly to do it in that way. I only have one source and one destination, but you will see afterwards I can have several sources, and I could have several destinations. Several destinations, yes, could be, but perhaps less relevant, but at least several sources, because I could pile them up vertically instead of piling my takes vertically, my sources vertically, instead of piling them up horizontally. That's then an evolution of the way of working. Let's move back to the basics in here, and now I'm gonna use my gates to put my in and my out points. Before that, I'm just going to recall here a scales and toolbars and source and destination. This is going to add one thing. Look at my toolbar, up here. I have my time where I'm playing, my editing modus, my in-out point of my green and red marker, my delta, and then of my selection, my in, my out point, and my delta of it. So now I'm going to say view, scales and toolbars, and I'm going to say source and destination. And now it moved the entire toolbar to the first section here. So I have exactly the same information squeezed on the left side. And on the right side, I have something new. And so now I have the values of those gates. And the gates, you find them here. Cursor to gate in, cursor to gate out, gate into cursor, gate out to cursor. I applied some shortcuts that are my shortcuts, but then you can apply everything you want, obviously, as a shortcut. And that means that if I go now here and I say my in point, I have now my gate into cursor and I see this white little thing that appears here. So obviously, logically, I would start with a beginning, and I'm going to make now something logical. So I would have different sources. This would be my take 1, 2, 3. So I will call this one take 1, take 2, and take 3, so that I can toggle quickly going from one to the other. If I want to be even a bit more wise, I could name them and change the color so I don't mix them up with the others. And take 2 and take 3. So to do that, I went into the markers tab. Great. And let me go back to here. Good. So now I can very quickly toggle from take 1, take 2, and take 3 with my play cursor and move them around. Good. And now I have my first take, and I'm going to decide that my first take is the best recording of all the 3. Of course, this is arbitrary, but that's how it is. And I'm going to use this as my guide track. So I'm going to move this up there as my initial guide track. And being a kind of a, well, some would be freaked about this, you don't need to. But if you want to start at 0, you go to 0, and you put your first gate in there. So now what I did, and you see it up here, is that my source in gate is at 57, 23, 20. It indicates it up there. And my gate in my destination is at 0. Okay, because that's how I decide. And next to it, I have now the possibility here to auto-edit, to overwrite, and to insert. I have those with the mouse, but of course I have here in the edit menu, not source or destination, sorry, and I have here the same 3 functionalities: auto-edit, overwrite, and insert. And those are there, of course, to be able to apply shortcuts to that. So if I say auto-edit source to destination, it will just move from this point. So if I would have made it a bit more precise, I would have moved this perhaps over here. And of course, if I want, I can listen from the gate in to make sure, yes, this is exactly what I want. And now I say auto edit, and it's going to precisely cut it from here up to there and move it up. Now, one thing, this is my guide track. Now, one thing is that if I check, it took not only the first clip, but all the following clips as well. This is perhaps something I want. If I don't want it, either I can eliminate them like this, obviously, this is a classic, or I can say, and this is then an option in here, in my source and destination, you see, limit one gate source to end of or the beginning of the clip. So if I enable this functionality and I do it again, it will just take one clip and not the rest in case there are clips within on the timeline. So it just takes one clip, and automatically, because it tries to be intelligent, it's a computer, after the edit, it thinks, yes, I made the edit now, and it automatically moves for the next cut to the end of the edit I just did. So it automatically moved the gate to the end of it. I see it here if I zoom in. Okay. Now I could say, I want to move on, and I want to take a portion of my second take and move it into my destination. So let me go to my second take, take 2, and I can listen to something. Let's say that this first part is something I want to move in. So now I make my endpoint again, but now I don't want to take the rest of the clip. I just want a portion of it. So this is now my out point. And here you will see that it changes the symbol. You see, instead of the arrows, I'm going to do it again. Instead of the arrows, before they were arrows like this, and now this is not an arrow anymore. This is a kind of a square. So it tells me there is a gate in and there is a gate out. And if I zoom it a bit in here, I'm going to make something very just straightforward so that you see it clearly, because it's then a different waveform and you can observe it. You see that now I put my in point in my destination over here, again with the functionality gate into cursor. And here it shows me that this will be the end of the length that I've selected in my source, independently of my zoom. Huh? So this is kind of grayed out or very light because this is what we call the 3-point editing, because I want exactly the same length to go in there. And now I can say overwrite. So I will overwrite this part on the top in there. Okay. And perhaps this is not what I want. What I would like is to do an insert. So it's going to move further to the right side and insert the length of what I move in there. And you can understand, if you're precise with your cut, with a score, with a musical cut, that makes it very straightforward, very musical in terms of the cutting, the trying, and to move further. You don't need to think very much with 6 or 7 keys to do your work on that aspect. Good. Now I have here the possibility, you see that this one, sorry, this is what we call the 3-point editing. Before we saw the 2-point editing with the 2 hours, this is the 3-point editing, and now we're going to see the 4-point editing, because now instead of having this precise output, I want to have it slightly longer. Okay, so I move now my gate in here, and automatically those two functionalities here appeared, replace or fit. That means now it will replace it again, even though I don't want it in the sense of the length. Or I could fit it, and then it would use a stretch tool, stretching my cotton to the length I've decided here. So I see, well, I see that the duration is actually approximately the same in frames. So let me move to something a tiny bit bigger. If I move it now here, I would see that I would go from something that is 222 in frames, 2 seconds, 22 frames, to something to 3 seconds and 0.9 frames. So that would stretch me this material to that aspect. Obviously, then depending the algorithm, the quality of the stretch tool, and so on and so on. This is in the general settings that you set it up, which stretch tool you want to use. And this is then performed and processed automatically on that aspect. Great. So now we've seen kind of what the source and destination is. You've seen the sources at the bottom where we take the extracts and we move them up. And then we're going to build it up bit by bit up to the end. Let me open my 5.1 project. And this 5.1 project has already a few things in there. And so what I first of all want to show you is that instead of having now a stereo track, I decided to have 6 mono tracks because I still want perhaps to pan something. And of course, now my sources are piled up. Instead of being, well, I should perhaps remove that one, it doesn't make much sense. So my sources are now piled up. This would be my source 1, and this would be my source 2. So it is more convenient vertically. I could even compare them to a certain extent if I want to compare, for example, some waveforms. If I need to align them, there's no reason. But if I want to compare, because perhaps there's one percussionist where I can see the kick in the waveform that he has been late or she has been late, and so I could choose the other waveform on the source 2, for example. But I have those 6 tracks moving here, and moving from one source to the other, it shows me the color also, so I constantly see in which source or which destination I'm listening to. So I see this kind of golden brown as my destination. I see this blue for my source 1 and the purple for my source 2. Okay, I'm going to close the mixer because I'm going to show you a few things on the right side. One very interesting and important thing as well is that now I have, instead of having 2 stereo tracks, I have already 16 tracks, 3 times 5.1. That makes already a lot of, how can I say, of people, of material in there. If I have a small screen, if I edit on a laptop, for example. And I have one functionality here that is called auto collapse. And that means that now, if I say A for all down there, I'm in my source 2, I can listen to it, and I go into my source 1, and You've seen that it auto-collapsed my source 2, it opens automatically my source 1, and of course it makes the auto solo as we've seen before, and the same for my destination. So I don't have any material for the moment, so let me bring some material in. So I'm gonna make my in point and my out point. So I make something very abstract. You will excuse me, but it's not about musical cuts here. It's just about showing the functionalities. Good. And I'm going to take something from over here, and I'm going to take my in point, and I'm going to move it on the top over there. Good. So now it took a piece of my take 1 and a piece of my take 2. And what interests me is here. And if I zoom in, I see that there is actually already a crossfade. Why? If I open my crossfade editor. Why? Because I set up already, this is in my workstation like that, I set up what I called a default crossfade, a root cosine default crossfade of 5 milliseconds. Now people would say, oh no, not 5 milliseconds, I need 10, or I need 20, you should do whatever you want. And I don't want a root cosine, I want a linear crossfade, or whatever it is. You can obviously set all this up. Now, to enable it, first of all, edit, you see that auto crossfade down here is enabled. If I disable it, and I insert, to the end of this section, or over here, I insert something like that. Let me take some material from here. So I make an endpoint and I move it up, auto edit. And I removed now the auto crossfade. So there is no crossfade, okay? Because now it's cut. So Pyramix always moves the last sample of the clip to 0 dB and the first sample of the coming clip to 0 dB to avoid a click. But nevertheless, it would be much smoother and nicer, certainly, with a crossfade. So the idea, and I show you now the concept, is that as soon as I select something, it will automatically show me the clip, either the in fade, the out fade, or the crossfade, depending from where I'm clicking, as a zoom value of what I have here. And then I have a possibility to show faders and to show a whole menu structure on the right side. There again, people like it, people remove it. I mean, you can obviously customize it the way you want or you need. And here now, for example, I can say preset, crossfade preset, load curve, load preset, and save preset. So load preset, default, and now I'm gonna apply directly the default crossfade to those 5 milliseconds to what I've done here. And if I want to change it, and I'm saying, no, I hate those 5 milliseconds, I want it to be 10, okay, 10 milliseconds. Now it's 10 milliseconds, and I go crossfade, save preset, default. And now I overwrite it, and it's going to be my next default preset crossfade, 10 milliseconds in root cosine. Good. If you want more fade, when you use the over, is there any possibility to compare before, after by seeing both? Yes, I show you that in a second about the crossfades. Just to finish my sentence before, if you want to have more in-depth about libraries, fades, and things like that with a crossfade editor, please watch the Multitrack webinar that talks about this. Now I'm going to show you one thing. I'm coming to your question in a second. Before, I want just to show you here the fact that I can, first of all, remove those functionalities if I want, as I said before. And that's not what I wanted to show. I wanted to say here, obviously, I'm in a 6-track environment, 5-1. And I here just see the track 1. So obviously they are not named. I could name this left, right, or center, rather, right, etc., LFE, and all of that. And so that when I just refresh it, I see now the name here, and with the mouse wheel, I can go down, so I see the left channel, the center channel, the right channel, and so on. Perhaps I don't want this. Perhaps I want to see 3 channels, or all the channels. So I can first of all go here, shown track, 1, 2, 3, 4. It gives me up to the number of tracks. So I can say 3 tracks. So now I see my left, center, right, and I see the fade out and the fade in being here. And now I can start to edit. So I can move them like I can move them on the timeline. And here I have some controls. So first of all, depending on where I'm going also, the mouse is also doing different possibilities. It means uh, if I put my mouse at the border, it's going to change the length of the crossfade. If I move them like here, it's going to move them entirely. If I move them here, it's going to move the curve. Okay, so I'm going to show you all of that. The first one being that the link length, I'm going to disable it. So it means now that the length will be independent from my fade out to my fade in. It means that all the 6 tracks of my fade out will remain on the same length because they group together and I want to edit them together. But they are independent of the length of my fade in. And then I'm going to go into link position. I'm going to say now, no, so that the fade out becomes totally independent to my fade in. And I can make something completely asymmetrical. And then you see that the length of the fade out of the fade in or the fade in is what we call symmetrical. I move one side and it deploys it or minimize it the same on the other side as well. And this I can disable because I would now precisely that my fade out starts where I am, and I then can just make it longer or shorter, and the same concept for the fade in. Now I messed up totally. I click this one, crossfade. It's going to just align them perfectly again. And now we're going to introduce, to answer your questions, memories. So they're down here, those memories. And of course, I can also apply them with shortcuts. I'm going to set this as my memory 1, set 1. And I'm going to now make this, so make it longer. And I'm going to move this around like there. And obviously, I'm just doing something silly. I should listen in between. And I'm going to set this as my memory 2. And then I can say like that. And I set this as my memory 3. Great. I have 3 memories for the moment, or 3 fades or crossfades that I think are interesting. How can I listen and how can I jump back and forth to them? So first of all, I have here all my listening devices. And I have here an important fact with a pre-roll and a post-roll. So basically it is 2 seconds, 2000 milliseconds if you wish, 2 seconds before and 2 seconds afterwards. I can modify them, make them shorter or longer over there. But for the moment, if I click in here, it's going to play 2 seconds before and 2 seconds after. So obviously, if I'm in a very long fade, so let me link length again. So now even in a desynchronized way, I can make them much longer like this, and this is going to be my position 4, and I can link them again. And now when I'm listening, I find this very annoying because I first have to listen to the 2 seconds before, then go through my fade, what I want to hear, and then listen to the rest. This is why I have this cursor there. And this cursor, or what we call reference point here, you see it there. This reference point, you see this black line, each time each of those symbols without and with the black line. So now it's going to take this as a reference point. So it means it's going to do -2 seconds and +2 seconds about this reference point. So I don't need any more to wait until it's there or even do that. And actually, I made a mess and I would like to go back to where I was before. So I go recall 1. So here I pressed my memory number 1 and I'm back to the fade I stored at the very beginning. And I can listen to all of that. Okay, this is a bit warm. And I can say this is number 2 and this is number 3. And this is number 4. So this is, I have 6 memories. So I can toggle in between those 6 memories in there. If I want to go a little bit further, I have here the possibility also to loop my fade. So here it's kind of a bit rough in terms of the edit, sorry, you would excuse me. But for the example, I think it speaks for itself. I can listen to my fade 4. click back to my 3, go back to my 2, and go back to my 1. So I can compare them while looping them, and while looping them, I can also modify them while I'm playing. Sorry, while I'm playing. Let me choose a longer one so it makes it more obvious. There we go. So now they're looped. Okay, so it makes it very something can be annoying over time to constantly loop it, but something very interesting to loop it and to be able to listen to it or not. Last but not least, I have here solo. This is not very much source and destination in this aspect, but it is more about if you work in a big multi-track on just a few tracks somewhere within a timeline, you then can listen when you use the listening method within the fade editor or the audition method within the fade editor. Do you want to hear the rest as well, or you don't want to hear it? And this is how you can loop it or not about that aspect. I think I made a nice little turnaround about all this fade editor. And let me move now to something that I find even more interesting. And I'm gonna now move to my or switch to my 48 track project. And here again, I built up two sources, the blue one being source 1, the green one being source 2, and now I'm not going to use gates anymore. I'm just going to move my blocks the way I want it. So I can just click here and listen to whatever I need to, and I say, okay, this is going to be the first part of it, and I'm going to move it up like that. And then obviously, again, I'm doing something completely silly in terms of no musicality. But now I'm going to listen to my different takes, even though some people won't work with scores, even they just listen to the different takes. Yeah, that sounds good. So let's align it over there. And then this is then great, this part. And we just have to insert this little guy over there. Okay. I can fix it, of course, to timeline if I want to. But now I made my little edits. And of course, I didn't in that aspect, I didn't enable the crossfade editor. Okay, but if I do this now, like here, obviously it will make it. And now I can work in my crossfade environment like this. And what is super interesting is that if I go into my tracks here and I say disable the collapse, I work here in 3 times 48 tracks. And that could be 3 times 72 tracks or 3 times 100 tracks if you wish so. So suddenly the handling of big amounts of tracks is not a big deal in the source and destination when you do big multi-track recordings, because you can collapse them in that way and then really work out the way you want in that. Last but not least, this is also where I decide what do I show as a collapsed tracks, because as a collapsed track, sorry, because it could be now I'm showing a track called left piano because this is my guide somehow in this piece I'm editing, but it could be a snare drum if I'm doing something out of the classical music or the acoustical music domain. Because it's a recording or whatever, and I just assemble different things with a live recording and then mix it back together. So this is a very handy way to move around multi-tracks, and it is a very intuitive way in this sense about the source and destination. Okay, I discussed a little bit all what I wanted to discuss. I hope it was very useful for you, that you could understand a bit more about it, and for those who work with it or know it already, to have a bit more, how can I say, hints or tricks, learn some things about it, and see you the next time for the next webinar. Thank you very much and have a great evening. Bye bye.